Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Expats Portugal webinar. Welcoming everyone, all our premium members and plus members of expatsportugal.com. Thank you so much. Tonight we have a very special presentation. It's with Jacqui, who's our colleague here at Expats Portugal, discussing how living in Portugal has exceeded her expectations. We're going to be open to questions as well of Jacqui, as well as Jerry and myself and Carl. We can all help you as well. But let's get this show on the road.
Thanks, Astrid. So, Jacqui, you have a presentation for us. Incidentally, Burns Night tonight. So happy Burns Night to anybody who is eating haggis or would like to be. So yeah, happy Burns Night. The visa has landed. Great news in capital letters from Linda. Thanks, Linda, for that. That's so lovely to hear. Wonderful news. Any more milestones like that, please share it. It's always wonderful to get your news like that. Got it this morning. I'll be in Portugal in April. Yippee! Says Linda. Fantastic. Hello from Calgary, Canada, where it is sunny and 7 degrees. Gail, good evening to you. And Botard from all from South Florida. Temperatures are 26 over there. Phyllis, thank you for that. Keep those messages coming in. Lovely to hear from you. Over to you, Jacqui.
Hi, everybody. We are going to do something, I think, a little bit different from last time, because last time we talked about the actual numbers in Portugal, and we went through a series of slides. And on reflection, I think today is really about not only going behind those numbers, not only talking about how my expectations were exceeded, and I believe they were, in my view, exceeded because I started to really understand the value behind those numbers. And I think that that's a very important way to look at it as well. And so we're going to start this right now. If we could get going on this one, first slide. So this is behind the numbers. And now we're at part 2 of our 3-part series. And I'm the consumer. Oh, this is the first one. Okay, the average cost of gas per liter. And Jerry's going to be talking about this. But before Jerry starts, I look at this and I see that clearly Portugal costs more than either the USA or the UK. But as a person who moved here from Boston, I will tell you a little bit about what happens to a car in the US and Boston in particular. In Boston, because of the weather, your car deteriorates at a remarkable, it's remarkable how quickly your car will deteriorate. Not only that, in the US, the roads are really problematic. So when you're, in your car's in the snow, the rain, and hitting, potholes the size of your car, that really does lower what your car is worth on pretty much a daily basis. And Jerry could tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, thanks, Jacqui. Okay, well, very quickly, first of all, we don't have snow. We don't have much ice, so we have no requirement to have salt spread on the road. So cars don't rust here. And although cars can start out more expensive than they are, say, in the US, that they're roughly on a par with the UK, but they're certainly more expensive than the US. They do hold their value for much longer. So, for example, my partner bought in 2016, we bought a new small Nissan, a Nissan Juke. We paid just over 20,000 euros for it, new. And we sold it after 5 years with 65,000 kilometers on the clock for just over 15,000 euros. So in 5 years, that car cost 5,000 euros, which is pretty good. I know that I have 2 daughters living in North Carolina. I know they buy a new or nearly new car, run it for 4 or 5 years, and then it's not worth anything when they come to exchange. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. The cars do hold a value here. So overall, the expenditure on a car can be a lot less, particularly when compared with the USA. Fuel is more expensive here, as Jacqui has shown. But then certainly compared with the USA, our cars in Europe tend to have smaller, more efficient engines. And I just took a look this morning at 2 new cars, an Audi A3 in the USA, the standard Audi A3 has a 32 is 32 US miles per gallon, whereas the same standard car in Portugal is 42 US miles per gallon. And that's because we have smaller but more efficient engines. Similarly, I looked at a Nissan Qashqai, which is a Nissan Rogue in the USA. In Europe, it's 37 US miles per gallon. In the USA, it's 33 US miles per gallon. So there is some saving to be made on fuel economy also when you buy cars here. We also, of course, have diesel cars, much more popular here. They're starting to be phased out now. Diesel most manufacturers are starting to drop diesels, but you can still buy 2, 3-year-old diesels, 1-year-old diesels are plentiful right across Europe and certainly Portugal. And so, for example, I found today a Peugeot small, which is a small sort of family-sized car, a diesel, 52 US miles per gallon, or a Renault Clio, also diesel, 65 US miles per gallon. So there is some money to be made in the fuel economy. And then finally, full electric and hybrid cars are becoming more popular in Portugal. The government is incentivizing businesses and individuals to buy electric cars. I checked today, we have over 60,000 charging stations across Portugal now, which is a fair number of charging stations for the size of the country. I personally haven't run an electric car. I never have a problem charging it. I have a home charger, but I also charge it on the road without any problem whatsoever. So those are the details behind the numbers. Happy to answer any other questions about cars, but keeping in line with what you want to say, Jacqui, hopefully that covers every point. Yeah,
that's great, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry. That really covers it because it shows that things are not always what they seem. And in this case, that's very clear. If you're getting better gas mileage, even though the gas may be more expensive, you're still coming out ahead.
And can I ask you a question at this point, Jacqui?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask you a question on this? Because your lifestyle's changed, I think, since you came to Portugal. So I'm guessing the amount of mileage you do has lessened because of the different way you're living. So that will have an impact, won't it? Do you think your annual amount of mileage has changed? And obviously, if you multiply that by the fuel cost,
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And I've also lived in LA where, you know, if you spend 2 hours getting to a place, you don't think much of it.
Right,
so, and I'm halfway through the country here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different way of living. And we have such great roads here.
Yeah.
I mean, the toll roads are perfect. So your car really does last. It's a very different experience. But we are ready for our next one, Astrid.
As we're going to the next slide, Joanna's saying in Northern California, the cost of a litre is up from that 91 centimos to 117 in Northern California there, Jacqui. So the price going up as we speak in the United States.
So right now, this is just kind of a fun thing. The average cost of a movie ticket being, as we see, that Portugal does the best. But one of the things I mentioned last time, and I'd like to say again, is movies that come from Portugal are almost always shown in their original language. They are not dubbed. So all those English movie, American movies or English movies, or whatever, even French movies, you're going to get them in their original language. So that was a kind of a shock when I came here. The second thing is people wonder, like, if they're into the art house cinema and all of that. What's really great about Portugal is that they put these art house cinemas in historic buildings often. So you'll go into an art house cinema in Lisbon and you're in a beautiful environment because for some reason, that seems to be the way art house cinemas go here in Portugal. And lastly, one of the things I just found out is if you like outdoor theaters, watching a movie outside, there's two places. There's a place in the Chiado where you could go up. It's the top of the building with a complete view of all of Lisbon. And here in Cascais, so you're seeing a movie while enjoying a complete view. And even here in Cascais, on top of Hotel Bahia, where you have a view of the ocean, they have an outdoor cinema as well. So these are just some of the things just for fun that you start to realize, wow, not only is it cheaper, but it's actually better. Plus they have all the IMAX. They even have the what do they call it? The 4DX, where, you know, the rain, you feel the rain on you, your chair, you know, moves. I personally hate that, but for people that like that, they have everything here and at a lower cost. So you could have a really good time going to the movies. And sometimes you even get free popcorn and I call it soda refills in some of the movie theaters. So it's a very enjoyable experience here. So could we go to the next one, Astrid? And this is something Astrid is going to talk a little bit about. I'm just going to briefly talk about higher education, university education. And I just was looking at it. Of course, the US, UK are 1 and 2 in terms of higher education. Surprisingly, for such a small country, I believe Portugal is rated 24th. But I will say this. If you look at higher education in the US, and I was just talking to Carl about this, you could go from a private school, you're paying about $56,000 a year. 5 years ago, my son was at Boston University and it was $74,000. We're talking with books, dorm, food plan, and, you know, everything, you know, that was the price of his education. And what's happening, of course, in the US is that people are leaving graduate higher education with tremendous debt, which is a terrible shame because you're starting a new life and there's this ball and chain. Portugal's very different. The most it can cost you a year if you're, I guess, an international student is $3,000, and we're talking the top universities here. And if you're, I believe, a nationalized citizen or a resident, I believe it's about $1,000 a year. So it's a very, very different way of looking at it. Astrid has 2 girls in the school system, and I asked her if she could remark on anything that may have surprised her, coming from Australia to the Portuguese school system. So Astrid?
Thank you, Jacqui. Thank you very much. My girls started school very, very young. They actually went to kinder first and then on to primary school, and now they're in the secondary or the 3rd cycle they call. And I guess the thing that has exceeded my expectations in the system is the quality of the food that they serve the kids at the school. It's very, very high standard, very nutritional based. It's cooked fresh on the premises. And in fact, one of the schools the girls went to, you could actually go and eat with your child if you wanted to. So they were open for parents. They were that proud of the food that they served that you could go and eat there. And I know my husband and I used to enjoy it for a very cheap meal. It would cost us about €1.70 per day for the high quality meal. And we were very, very happy knowing they were getting well fed. The other thing, my girls are now in the private Portuguese system, and as a non-Portuguese speaker or very limited Portuguese speaker, I was very concerned about their English and reading and writing, but it's definitely exceeded my expectations with the level of English education that they have in the schools here. The girls are very, very good with their reading, writing, their comprehension, everything that you can think of. So all thank you to the Portuguese school, even though they're still high up there with the English. And I think the other thing that was really, really good and exceeded my expectations when the girls did first start school was that they do have special support classes for kids who Portuguese is not their first language, so that they allow them to go into special classrooms with other students from foreign nationalities, and they're taught Portuguese at a level that's right for them. So they're not thrown straight into the Portuguese standard class where they will flounder. They have the ability there to get the extra support that they need. With my eldest daughter now going into year 10 and starting to think about the university options, she's pretty warm to the idea of going back to Australia to study her university, but we're trying to encourage her to stay within Europe because, as Jacqui said, we're looking at about 1,000 to 2,000 euros per year for a very high standard university education, as opposed to the huge cost of education in Australia, similar to those in the States. So that's something to really look forward to as well. So I think that's it, Jacqui.
There's the Erasmus system as well, isn't there, Astrid? Erasmus as part of the university education in Portugal seems to be great for young people in this country, having a trip abroad, well, a trip into other parts of Europe within the Erasmus project, which I've spoken to so many young Portuguese people who've had a great time getting away from Portugal for a little bit of a sort of sandwich part of their degree course and making new friends and seeing another part of Europe.
You know, one of the things close to you, Astrid, is I believe Nova University, which is all English, and their business school is now ranked one of the top business schools in the EU. And what I love is when you drive by Carcavelos, where the university is, all the students seem to run onto the beach and into the waves to surf at once. I think they're having surf breaks at that school. But it looks amazing, and it has very, very high reviews, and it's all in English, so you don't have to be able to speak Portuguese. But let's go to the next one, which is healthcare. Now, we're looking at the huge differential here for healthcare, and I'd like to just kind of give you a little bit behind the scenes about healthcare in the US, because that's what I know. And the difference between the US healthcare system and the Portuguese healthcare system. So one of the things that they believe the US is doing, it's a state-of-the-art system. The US spends more on its sick nationals than any other country in the world. But what's happening is the system is kind of sickness focused. And what's happening is that because it has such a different focus, the lifespan in the US seems to be decreasing. Carl, I don't see my, okay.
We just wanted to see you for a moment there.
Oh, okay.
But you put your presentations back again.
Yeah. So what's happened in the US is the life expectancy has declined. But Portugal has a very different focus. It's not a sickness focus, but it's a focus on maintaining health. So even though the US spends a lot more money, lifespan is declining. As Portugal spends less money, but it doesn't have a sickness focus, it has a wellness focus, more of a wellness focus, and lifespan is increasing. In fact, the lifespan in Portugal is averaging about 6 months longer than any place else in the EU. So I thought that was a bit interesting here. It's also very interesting in the US, there seems to be a shortage of doctors, as we're in Portugal top the list where there's 57 doctors per 10,000 people. And that's actually a very strong ratio in Portugal. So those are some of the things. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Also the price, let's just say if I needed a hip replacement in the US, I'm looking at close to 40, if I have no health insurance, I'm looking at close to 40,000 USD. If I had no health insurance and I came to Portugal for that same hip surgery, I'd be looking at around 6,600 euros for that same hip surgery. Also, the cost of medicine is different. I think there's a drug, I believe it is for, and somebody could tell me if I'm wrong about this. I think it's called LEQ or something like that. And the difference, I believe it's for high blood pressure. I believe it's a high blood pressure medicine. And it is in the US about 10 times the cost it would cost here in Portugal. And that's because the US is so fragmented in trying to get costs down when, negotiating with drug companies, and that's not the same thing here. The government's negotiating for you here. And lastly, healthcare is a human right in Portugal. It is, people say it's a human right because this society sees things differently. It's a society based on collectivism, as a place like the US is individualism. So, I mean, there's a cost to individualism. And unfortunately, that means if healthcare, if you ever looked in the US, you see many GoFundMe pages for people who have a sick family member and about to lose their house, and they have these GoFundMe pages so that people can help donate to the cost of unneeded surgery for a family member. That is not uncommon to see in the US. So these are just some of the things to think about when coming here. And that's, in my mind, that's a tremendous value of living here.
Mm-hmm.
Can we go to the next one?
Eliquis is the name of the drug. They're very expensive blood thinner. So thanks, Debbie, Laurie, and Dwight.
Thank you.
Out with that.
And I just added, this is the health. If you consider all those facts, now look where Portugal stands in relation to the US. It's 12th in their healthcare system ranking, and yet they're spending less money. And the US is at 23. So, things are not always. This is an area where my expectations were exceeded. The healthcare system here in Portugal I find it amazing. Mm-hmm. So let's go to the next one, cost of groceries. One of the things about the EU, because the EU, and I believe they called the EFSA, is like the FDA, which they're the ones that regulate the food industry. And this I found amazing. In the US, the FDA says, prove to me that it's harmful first, and we'll take it out of the food system. That's what they're saying. Prove to us that it's harmful. In the EU, they say, prove to us that it's safe, and we'll allow it into the food system. That's a very, very different philosophical approach to what you eat. And so because of that philosophical approach being so different, the food in the EU is healthier. Instead of in the US, I think there are eight different ingredients that are banned, as opposed to the EU, there are 14. So we're looking at a very different approach again here for groceries. Not only that, most people, when they come from the US to Portugal or in the EU, they don't feel the need to buy organic because the laws here are so much better and so much stricter about, what's going into our food here. And I think that here we're paying less for this food, and yet it's healthier, and the laws are stricter. So that's one of the, again, exceeding expectations right there. Now, the next one is the average cost of a plane fare. So can we go to that one? This is, if you've ever, and I asked, Astrid, could you put the Rick Steves link into the chats? One of the things about Portugal, like, let's just say, if you're a planner, you could do amazing in terms of getting that 44 euro flight to between Portugal and Paris. If you're a very light packer and willing to put your clothes on your back, not even a small suitcase, you're going to get a 44 and plan in advance. And that's one of the great things. If you're going away for a weekend and you're retired, those are some of your options. Some of the things, I put this Rick Steves link in because he really explains the different low-cost airlines in different countries within the EU and how to navigate. So if you have a chance, give that one a look. The other thing, about what I find kind of interesting this was just my experience. I took a Ryanair flight for the first time. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but a lot of people told me as an American, it's a very tough airline. You're going to suffer. It's not luxurious. And that's when I realized the experience of flying in the EU is completely different than flying in the USA, because in the USA we're used to terrible abuse of the airlines. So when I went, me and my husband looked at each other with, this is great. It's clean. The service is great. It's on time. I'm not saying every flight's going to be like that, but we have to say, coming from the US and our experience in flying any US airline, I will say you will be very, very, very pleasantly surprised. So this is something to think about. Excuse me one sec. I think I'm ready to go. And if you, to the next one, could we go to the next one? The next, transportation. So this is one that we're looking at that Portugal comes in very low. But I want you also to consider that I think in April 2022, if you're over 65 and under, I believe, a student or even below the age of 23, you could take all public transportation in Lisbon for free. And that came as a result of the pandemic and because they wanted to lower emissions. So I think that's pretty remarkable to be able to say, you know, you're 66 years old, you're retired, you're traveling on public transportation for free in Lisbon. The other thing, the municipality I live in, Cascais, they have public transportation for all residents, all workers who, if you work or live in the Cascais municipality, which is a very large municipality, all transportation, all local transportation is free of charge. And there are some other municipalities in Portugal that are now starting to think about doing this. I think there's one other up north. So this is, I think this is kind of a wave of the future. Like when I moved to Cascais, I never thought I'd be able to use public transportation for free because I'm a resident. That was just one other advantage. And it was a very happy one. Okay, hold on. Oh, also I wanted to mention that discounts on train tickets, if you're traveling on train like to Porto, if they're purchased at least 5 days in advance, it's 50%. 8 days in advance, it's 65%. So planning in advance has great merit here. Whether you're traveling by plane, whether you're traveling public transport, it really makes a difference to plan ahead in terms of your budget. So we're going to, speak of budget, we're going to do cost of dining out in Portugal. Can we go to the next one? Now, Jerry said last time, and I absolutely agree. So this, and I actually have the Portugal one is a little bit high, but one of the things I appreciate about the cost of dining out in Portugal is this 3-course meal that has includes your wine, includes either wine, beer, and a coffee and dessert. If you go and decide that you like your biggest meal of the day at lunch, it's quite discounted. Even in the most elegant restaurants, they will have the plate of the day or you know, some lunch special. But if you go and you enjoy a fuller lunch and a lighter dinner, it is a significant savings because culturally it seems everywhere I go, I see it over and over again, how great it is to be able to enjoy a great lunch. And one of the things somebody commented on about Portugal dining out is it's considered rude to give you your check before you ask for it. So nobody's kicking you out of the restaurant or off your table like they do in the US, which is horrible. So this is one of the other reasons I love dining out in Portugal. The other thing I asked if you wouldn't mind putting the link, there's an app I use called The Fork. And if you use The Fork, a lot of times like local restaurants in your area, they'll have like specials where they're like 30% off Monday through Thursday, so I always check the fork before I decide where I'm going to go. And I've actually discovered some really great restaurants using the fork, and they are heavily discounted. So if you have a chance, look on the chats for that link as well. Now we're going to go to the next slide, which is cost of utilities. Now we see that Portugal is the lowest for cost of utilities, but I'm going to read something. So yes, the cost of utilities are lower here in Portugal, but there is something I think behind those numbers that's, if you're an environmentalist, you'll very much appreciate. So one of the things Portugal has done, it's completely eliminated coal from its energy source. It intends to have, it's hoping to become 80% renewable electricity by 2026. We have the largest solar farm in Europe is currently being built in Portugal, which they think will be operational in 2025. And they're going to have the first floating wind farm in Europe will be built off the Portuguese coast. So Portugal's really thinking a lot about its carbon footprint, and it's doing better than most of the EU. And I think eventually, once renewable energy becomes a larger part of the equation for our utilities, I believe costs will go down even further, but that's sometimes up to the politicians. But that's the hope, right? So, and I think it's great. I think if you're an environmentalist, these are the things you'll be looking for. So we have, let's just see. I think that we have one, okay, number 13. So this is the cost of living index. And before I go into this, I wanted to talk about another index, which is the Global Peace Index. And Portugal is ranked as the 7th safest country in the world in 2023. And it ranks 162 countries around the world according to their levels of peace. The US, of 162, is ranked 122. So for me, that living in a safe country, I've always lived in New York City, Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I didn't realize to what degree worrying about my personal safety, what energy it took out of me, until I no longer had to worry about it to that degree. I mean, I'm so careful. And I realized how much psychic energy frees up, not having to worry that when I walk down the street, am I safe? And I will say it means a lot to me to feel that I'm in a safe country. And as a woman, it means an extraordinary amount. So that's one of the other things I absolutely love about Portugal. And when we think of the cost of living index, and we're looking at where Portugal is and how it's inexpensive compared to the UK or the USA. But when you think about cost, we assign value, right, to determine cost. And what we value is a very individual process. So if you love walking down the beach and enjoying a sunset, that's something you value. Or going out to dinner and a movie at an affordable cost with friends, or your new friends here in Portugal, that's another value you have. If you see that healthcare is a human right, again, another value. Do you want to live in a country that has a lower carbon footprint? Absolutely. All these things are things we value. For me, it was safety. Safety was a huge value. So I look at a cost of living index, but that doesn't really speak to what I value or what other people here might value when they think about moving to Portugal. I believe you could find what you value here. And I don't think you should be surprised if what you find here will also exceed your expectations, like it did mine. So
thank you, Jacqui. That's great. Yeah, I see. It feels like a real 80-20 thing. And obviously, when you're on the other side of the water or outside of Portugal wanting to be here, numbers of what you are tangible things that you can go on. And that's quantity, isn't it, rather than quality? And it's only when you get here that you're able to have your expectations exceeded, as you've put it, in quite, in your case, quite an extreme way. It would appear, but you can't have that happen until you actually get here and live the life. So the numbers are useful. And to be fair, you know, the numbers have changed in the last couple of years. If you're only going on numbers, that's a somewhat sobering metric to use. And I think you've made the point beautifully that this is about quality as well as quantity, and you just can't tell until you get here. So thank you for sharing with us, you know, all of these things that you couldn't possibly have known until you committed to Portugal, came here and lived the life.
And one of the other things I wanted to mention when I thought about the healthcare system, and I may have mentioned this earlier, I was here during the pandemic. And what I thought was amazing is that this country gave everybody access to the healthcare system, even if you were here illegally during the pandemic. You still had access to the healthcare system. I mean, that would never happen in the US. That's all I could say. I mean, and I think that was the first time, because I just moved here, that I realized, this is a country I want to live in. This is a country that cares so much for the people living here that it would give everybody, because we were in a crisis. We were in a pandemic. Yep. So I think that was one of the first times I really realized what living here meant to me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We'll take a few more of the sort of general points here and ask you some questions, and then we can, when we've ended the recording or the recorded part of the webinar, we can take some more personal questions as well from people. For you, Johanna saying a good example of the difference between preventative care versus waiting until a problem exists. Would you say that's a fair assessment of the difference between the US and Portugal, perhaps, is that it's a bit more preventative, a little bit more testing and analysis?
Absolutely. That's exactly it.
Right.
And that's why they focus here more on primary care physicians.
Yeah.
As we're in the US, everyone has a specialty, because they understand that your primary care person is your first step to preventative care.
Okay. Laurie responding to the public transport, 50% discount for seniors, correct? How would Jacqui possibly know that? But I believe there are discounts for seniors, and admirable ones too. And you mentioned some of the discounts there, of course. And Dwight, thank you for this, Dwight. And first or second class is really great. Seats comfy and can get snacks and coffee, cervejas and vino while enjoying the view. And the senior rate is fantastico. Thank you for that, treating us to a bit of Portuguese. Sounds like it's going very well in the Miller household. And Phyllis was asking earlier on about where to source a second-hand vehicle, a used vehicle. Thanks, Jerry, for that. Stand Virtual is often the recommendation we make here. And we have had earlier webinars specifically on motoring, which are worth a look, Phyllis, that you'll see on the Expats Portugal YouTube channel as well. And of course, this video up on that channel from 6 o'clock, if you want to see those numbers again and hear Jacqui for a second time, you can do that at 6 o'clock this coming Sunday when this video will go out and be published there. And better rates in major cities, says Dwight as well. But yes, seniors, if you go online with the app, and that'll be cp.pt on the train, you get a fantastic rate on train travel. The app's pretty good as well for finding out train times and for learning more about. Jerry disagrees. Do you not like the CP app, Jerry?
Yeah. The app is dreadful. You try and use it sort of 20 minutes before you want to jump on a train and see what happens. It's awful. It's agony. It's torture.
I think it's probably the way you and I how we use trains differently, perhaps there.
Yes,
okay, fair enough. CP is good according to some people, but not others. What would you recommend then?
Try landing back at the airport and then getting your phone out and saying, okay, right, I'll book a train and I'll get on it in 10 minutes. And the app doesn't work because you have to give it so much notice before you can book.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, it's not so good for the jet setters. For us country folk, we quite like it.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, if you do get the hang of it, it is very inexpensive, and it's, you know, you can travel off peak, and yes, if you're over 66, not that I am, I know I've got years to go before I get there, but if you are over 66, then you will get a 50% discount. But you have to register, and and do all that on the app first.
Right. Okay. Good luck with that. You can do it on desktop as well. You don't have to use the app, of course. And yeah, I think one of the differences with trains to be aware of as well is that if you're on the more provincial lines like me, and there's no ticket office, you get on and pay on the train. Now, it's frowned upon if there's a train station with a ticket office. It's frowned upon to board the train without having bought a ticket, and I think that's where people can find themselves in trouble, which I have in the past. The comparison is always with the United States and sometimes with the UK. Why not compare Portugal with its rivals like Spain, Italy, France, and Morocco? I think that's a fair comment, George. And the place to do that will be the forum, of course, is to reach out to people from other parts of the world and see what their comparisons are. I think we have to just go with the larger numbers here in the bigger communities. But if anyone wants to speak to that with their comparisons, if you lived elsewhere, you know, you might be American, you might have lived in Spain, Italy, France, or Morocco, as George is pointing out. Do pipe up and let us know. What airline can I find a decent rate from Spain to Portugal? So who's doing that, and who can speak to that? Jacqui, have you done? I mean, you've done it the other way around, won't you?
I would look at this website by Rick Steves,
Okay.
because he really lists things, and he talks about, you know, which is a Spanish airline, which is a Portuguese airline, where you're most likely to find discounts. Just give it a look. And the thing about air travel is it changes every 5 minutes. I mean, literally, you'll book a ticket and you didn't buy it, and then you go an hour later, you're getting a different cost.
Yeah.
So I find air travel to be quite confusing at times, but overall, I have seen it be significantly cheaper within the EU. If you plan in advance. If you're doing it a day before, it goes up tremendously.
Yeah, and it's a whole new learning curve with the likes of Ryanair and EasyJet here in Europe. But you can get some good bargains, as you said. And connecting your comments about food quality in Europe compared to the US and with air travel. A friend of mine used, I think, Ryanair the other day. Looked at the sandwich that they bought, which is extra. You can buy these things in flight, and its sell-by date was 2026, which is quite good to know, isn't it? That's not going off anytime soon.
Horrible.
Wonder what's in that. Okay. They will give a refund if a train is cancelled or if there's a strike. That's something to be aware of, actually. Just recently there have been some train strikes, and the app isn't very helpful. You can go to the published time on the app, and you might not know that there's been a strike. If that does happen, you will get a refund. It happened for us, says Dwight. LaRonda, does the free transportation apply to seniors in every region? I've heard that free transportation is only for the Lisbon city and region. It's Cascais as well, isn't it? It is regional, that, isn't it?
It is regional, and and Lisbon was very, very proud to present this because, well, it's Lisbon. And the other thing is that they really did believe that to continue this after the pandemic, and it would lower the carbon footprint. And I think other municipalities are going to eventually come around because it's important.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Dream Team link is in the chat. We'll be doing that at 9 o'clock this evening. George, as for train tickets, my experience is that one should always book in advance. There you go. If one shows up at a station, there is a risk that the first train or two are fully booked. Yes, the busier the city and the bigger the city, the more likely that is. Go on, Jerry.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in on that. That the intercity trains, you have to book a seat.
Yeah.
So if you turn up and it's fully booked, you won't get on the train. The regional trains, you don't have to book a seat, but the inner city you do. Sorry, the intercity trains.
Yeah.
So it is advisable to book in advance for those trains.
Yes, and people might be wondering what on earth I was talking about. On the sort of parochial, provincial lines, a lot of the old stations, you just walk up, there's no ticket office, and the guards collect the money and give you a ticket on the train. But you need to be clear about that before you get on a train which type of train you're using, because as Jerry says, you've got to book on the fast intercity trains, not so much on the provincial ones. Dwight, thank you for your comments this evening. Metros too, then you have to order an Uber. Is that when the metros are on strike? So yeah, that's, we're having a little bit of that, some industrial action in various sectors in Portugal. So keep an eye. I guess the forum again, if anyone's got a heads up on that, let us know in the forum if there's any industrial action going on, and that can help others in the community. So let's go to perhaps a concluding comment from you, Jacqui. And if anyone wants to ask a question now before we end the recording, fair enough. Otherwise, just pop your hand up in a moment and we can talk to Jacqui. But yeah, in conclusion, Jacqui, your expectations exceeded by many factors by the sound of it.
And you know what I didn't mention, and I think I really should have, how welcoming the Portuguese people are. And I really got a taste of that when I was locked in a building because of the pandemic.
So I wonder what you're going to say there. Okay.
I had the best neighbors. They would not let anybody over 50 do any food shopping. So the younger neighbors did all our food shopping. They would leave everything. People were lending each other cars, they lent us cars. I mean, people were beyond generous, beyond kind. And I always say that during the pandemic, I didn't make friends, I made family.
Yeah, wonderful.
Because we were in it together, and people were, the Portuguese could not have been kinder or more generous.
Yeah, I think it's probably quite hard for you to convey exactly how much your expectations have been exceeded, but I think you've done a pretty good job of it tonight, and I suspect that will happen for people here with the intangibles that you can't know about until you get here. George, thank you. Braga, €350 for senior monthly bus pass, essentially free then. Thank you for that, George D. And it's Gail who's typing under the name Dwight Miller. Mills, apparently. Is that his nickname? He's enjoying fantastic food and vino. We have felt so welcomed, picking up on your point there. In Ireland, beef is cheaper than everything else. In Portugal, fish is the cheapest. And which is the most healthy? Is that a kind of rhetorical question, I think, Stuart, there to point to the oily fish, how that might be somewhat better for you than red meat? But I guess everything in moderation. Stuart, good to see you here tonight. Any questions or any further points before we conclude the recording? I think we'll probably pause it there, unless there's anything you want to add, Astrid or Jerry. Okay, so let's pause the recording there. Thank you so much, Jacqui. Great job this evening.